The history of the Star Wars universe was dominated by the great wars between the Jedi and the Sith, whose fearsome Force abilities meant that their struggles often dominated the galactic stage. But as many fans know, there was another powerful faction that regularly played a decisive role in their wars: the Mandalorians, a warrior race that fought against both orders. Many Star Wars fans associate the Mandalorians more with the dark side and the Sith than with the peace-loving Jedi, and even though the Mandalorians did ally with the Jedi at times, this association is mostly accurate, and the clans did tend to lean more towards the darker side of things. But despite this, they actually didn't ally with the Sith all that much. Only once did the Mandalorians as a people pledge themselves to the Sith, and the Mandalorians who did so were vastly different from the ones we know. In this video, we'll be explaining why.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Consider for a moment what you think of when you hear the word Mandalorian. You probably think of humans in sleek Beskar armor, sporting jetpacks and blasters, each of them distinct but with a similar aesthetic. But the Mandalorians of 4000 BBY, the Mandalorian Crusaders, were a lot different. For starters, very few of them were human. Most were Taungs, members of a grey-skinned reptilian species. Their armor and weaponry were much less uniform and conventional than those of later years, and their most distinctive tools were not jetpacks, but rather basilisk war droids, massive, heavily armed and armored droid mounts that they rode into battle. These were the Mandalorians who, under Mandalore the Indomitable, allied with the Brotherhood of the Sith during the Great Sith War, the only time the Mandalorians as a people waged war side by side with Darksiders. Let's step back a bit. The Mandalorians were a faction of warriors founded by the Taungs, who had evolved on ancient Coruscant but had been driven off by their human neighbors. After time immemorial spent wandering the Rim, the Taungs eventually settled on a jungle world far from the core. There, led by the warlord Mandalore I, they battled the mythosaurs, titanic city-sized reptiles that were the planet's dominant species, driving them to extinction and claiming their world for their own. They named the planet after their leader, calling it Mandaryme, or Mandalore in Galactic Basic, and they started calling themselves the Mandoade, the Mandalorians. What would become the common code of the Mandalorian clans started as Taung religion. The first Mandalorians believed in two gods, each diametrically opposed: Cad Harangia, the god of action, and the sloth god Arasum. They believed Cad Harangia pushed them to fight, to take on and overcome challenges, constantly making themselves stronger in the process, while Arasum tried to tempt them into stagnation and pacifism. In order to reject Arasum and prove themselves worthy of Cad Harangia, the Mandalorians began an endless war against their galactic neighbors, the Mandalorian Crusades. The Mandalorian Crusades lasted from 7000 BBY to 4000 BBY, and over the course of that period, the Crusaders changed dramatically. Despite their extreme aggression and their belief that their way was the only legitimate way, they were surprisingly receptive to beings of other species, and they accepted anyone who converted to their ways without question. The Mandalorians remained Taung-dominated, but their ranks were swelled by Mandalian giants, Jakilians, and humans from Concord Dawn and Gargon, as well as a few members from other species here and there. The Mandalorians' technology was constantly changing as well, as they were always quick to adopt equipment from more advanced species they bested in war. A few things remained constant among the Mandalorian Crusaders, however. From the beginning, the Mandalorians were divided into clans, all of whom maintained settlements on Mandalore but often claimed nearby worlds for their own. These clans competed constantly, but would always put their differences aside at the behest of the reigning Mandalore, the greatest of the Mandalorians, who earned the title by claiming Mandalore's mask. Mandoa served as a lingua franca among these clans, and from the beginning, all Mandalorians wore distinctive vacuum-sealed armor. The armor of the Crusaders was far more diverse than the kits worn by later Mandalorians. Each set was highly unique and ornamented with bones and war trophies, but they all contained Beskar and featured distinctive T visors. The most important constants, however, were two sets of ideological principles, the Rezol Nar and the Canons of Honor. The Canons of Honor were a simplified version of the early Mandalorians' complicated religious laws, which over the millennia were secularized and mostly just dictated what was and wasn't considered honorable. The Rezol Nar were more concrete. Also known as the Six Actions, these were simple rules that all Mandalorians were expected to follow during the Crusader era. These rules were to wear armor, speak Mandoa, defend one's family, raise one's children as Mandalorians, contribute to the clan, and obey the Mandalore. The early Mandalorians believed that failing to follow these rules would deprive them of their very souls. Indeed, they believed that sentients were actually born without souls and only gained them when they swore to uphold the Rezol Nar. This faded over the course of the Crusades, as the Mandalorians became much more secular and driven by honor instead of religious zealotry. Over the course of the Mandalorian Crusades, the Crusaders carved out a pocket of the Outer Rim to call their own, which remained Mandalorian space even to the time of the Clone Wars. They then spread beyond Mandalorian space, conquering or destroying many neighboring species. They completely exterminated the Fenelar and the Telonians, claiming the shipyards and war fleets of Fennel for their own. They conquered and assimilated the Jaquilians, appropriating their advanced bladed weapons, and the Crusaders even attacked Republic systems in the Pathandir Fury and the Nakat incursions, during which they appropriated Republic rocket packs and energy weapons. About 3,000 years into the Mandalorian Crusades, the Mandalorians underwent their first of many significant shifts. They had been slowly secularizing for a while by that point, but in around 4024 BBY, their leader, a Taung named Mandalore the Indomitable, had a vision on the Holy World Shogun. This vision led him to radically reform the Mandalorians' belief system. From that point forward, their crusades wouldn't be an extension of a divine struggle between Cad Harangia and Arasum. Rather, Mandalore's revelation was that war was holy in itself. From that point forward, the Mandalorians began worshipping war as a concept. Spurred on by this reformation, Mandalore led his crusaders on a campaign deep into Republic space. They attacked and depopulated the planet Navuta, and then pushed all the way to the core world Basilisk, which the Crusaders rendered uninhabitable. They all but wiped out the Basiliskans, enslaving the few survivors, and they claimed the Basiliskans' formidable war droids as their own. With these powerful new weapons, the Mandalorian Crusaders then attacked and conquered the deep core planet Quar, where Mandalore set up his camp in a ruined city. By the time of the Great Sith War, the Mandalorian Crusaders were different from the original followers of Mandalore I, but they were even more different from the Mandalorians of later years. Though they maintained strongholds in Mandalorian space, they were primarily nomadic, attacking planets across the galaxy without warning. They led these assaults from the bridges of Fenelar dreadnoughts and the saddles of Basilisk war droids, the latter of which they used to perform orbital drops onto target worlds, ODST style. In personal combat, they used Republic jetpacks and pulse wave blasters, Jaquilian blades, and massive Beskar battle axes. They were a fearsome sight, especially Mandalore the Indomitable, the greatest of them all. While the Mandalorians were harassing the worlds around Quar, the Sith were seeing a resurgence in the galaxy at large. The fallen Jedi Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma had proclaimed themselves the new Dark Lords of the Sith, and Qel-Droma had taken command of the Krath, a Sith cult that controlled the Empress Theta system. This system happened to be near Quar, and Mandalore believed that the fledgling Sith fleets there were weak and ripe for conquest, since the Republic and the Jedi would never come to their aid. The Crusaders began raiding Krath's supply convoys, eventually attracting the attention of Ulic Qel-Droma himself. Qel-Droma challenged Mandalore to single combat on Quar, and despite Mandalore's attempts to give himself the advantage, the fallen Jedi won. Victorious, Keldroma demanded Mandalore's allegiance, and the warlord vowed that his clans would serve the Dark Lords of the Sith. Together, his Crusaders and the Krath waged war against the Republic, forming the backbone of Sith forces during the Great Sith War. In this conflict, Mandalorians fought side by side with Krath cultists and Masasai warriors, devastating Coruscant and vast chunks of Republic space. But the Sith lost the Great Sith War. Ulic Qel-Droma abandoned the Sith and was captured by the Jedi, while Exar Kun was cornered by the Jedi on Yavin 4. The Mandalorians, meanwhile, made the mistake of attacking Onderon, where they were defeated by a joint Onderonian Republic defense force and driven in disarray to Duxun, Onderon's jungle moon. There, Mandalore the Indomitable was swarmed and devoured by wild beasts, as were many of his warriors. The story of the Mandalorians didn't end there, of course. Mandalore's mask was found by a Taung warrior who proclaimed himself Mandalore the Ultimate, and the Mandalorians regrouped, even claiming Duxun for their own and using the jungle's deadly beasts as challenges to train their recruits against. But the defeat of the Mandalorians in the Great Sith War and the ascension of Mandalore the Ultimate led to a transformation in Mandalorian society. Mandalore the Ultimate reformed the Mandalorians into the Neo-Crusaders, driving the clans to abandon the last of their nomadic ways and become more conventionally militarized, more organized, and more human-dominated. From there, the Mandalorians evolved into the ones we're familiar with. But the Mandalorians never again pledged themselves to the Sith as they had in the Great Sith War. Some scattered bands allied with the Sith in later years, and Mandalore the Ultimate ultimately went to war against the Republic at the behest of Sith emissaries, but they always kept the Sith at arm's length. After the Mandalorian Wars, in which the Mandalorians were nearly wiped out, most of the Mandalorians came to distrust the Sith completely. Some Mandalores, most notably Mandalore the Preserver, even called for allying with the Jedi against the Sith despite their ideological differences. He understood that the Sith only saw the Mandalorians as tools and would wipe them out if they ever won, and over time, he and others like him won most of the clans around to this way of thinking, leading them to ally with the Jedi in many later Sith wars. Not all Mandalorians went that far, but after the near destruction of the Mandalorian Crusaders due to the faithlessness of the Sith, the clans as a whole would never again pledge themselves to the service of the dark side. So, that's our look at the Mandalorian Crusaders, who we think are the coolest version of the Mandalorians. But what do you think? Is there another Mandalorian era you'd like to see us discuss? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section below.